Ready Check Radio. What's up, Internet? It's Thursday. It's 7 p.m. Eastern. That means here on Ready Check Radio, it's time for the Relic Grind, the Final Fantasy XIV Square Enix podcast, where we talk about, well, like Final Fantasy XIV and things Square Enix. I mean, it's pretty self-explanatory. I'm your host, Mike Byrne, a.k.a. Magic Man, like I am every week. And if you're watching on YouTube, listening on iTunes, Spotify, Audible, any of the platforms, we appreciate it. Thank you so much. Make sure you give it a like, a thumbs up, a subscribe, turn on those notifications, throw your opinions and comments in their Feed Senpai algorithm. But more importantly, tell a friend. It's easy, it's fast, it's cheap, and it's a great way to support us. If you need our socials, check out the website right down there, readycheckradio.com. I've got them all in a little line in the upper right-hand corner. Makes it easy to find. Plus, you'll get backlogs of all of the episodes here of the Relic Grind, our Saturday show, Gaming Gumbo, and even the old Snowbound show, which I swear someday Activision and Blizzard will stop touching each other when they're not supposed to, and
ooh, ouch.
we'll be able to do that show again. One day, I hold out hope. I have not stricken it from the show or from the site. We'll see.
After Microsoft gets it, maybe?
Maybe. We'll see. It's one of my favorite shows. We do have a little bit of Final Fantasy XIV news, Final Fantasy XI news, and a few other miscellaneous Square Enix items. But Final Fantasy trading card game. Yes, it has a trading card game. Comes out with this new set from Nightmares, unofficially Opus 19. They've dropped the Opus titles a while ago, but we still all call them Opuses. So From Nightmares is the set. Comes out officially tomorrow. We're going to go through what we usually do and go through all the legends, giving you our thoughts along the way. Joining me to do so, Mr. Chris Montoya, a.k.a. Tarkoth. What's up, sir?
Greetings, programs. I thought this was a Snowbound episode because, like, I'm hyped for Diablo 4 open beta. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, won't touch it. Sorry. No, won't touch it. Have no intention of buying it, giving them money. Can't do it. But if you're playing it and you enjoy it, I'm glad you found a game you like. I'm glad you found a game.
Much better than Immortal.
Well, yeah, that's not hard. That's not hard. Also on the line, Mr. Adam Lane. What's up, Kronos?
Not too much. Just busy.
I was gonna say you're actually looking pretty chill. You're just kind of like, yeah, I'm here.
Yeah, I'm in perpetual state of tiredness.
Oh,
and this man doesn't even have kids. Doesn't have a kid. Man, this dude would be beat with some kids. He would just be absolutely wrecked. Absolutely. I'm going to send you my kids. Tark, send Kronos your kids too, and then report back, Kronos. Let us know how it all goes.
Please don't.
Please don't. All right, let's get into some 14 news first. Not a lot going on. We do have the Hatching Tide event coming up, which is pretty cool. I like the Tomberry outfit reward. And a new emote, the frightening emote. But the Tomberry outfit looks pretty badass. So we got that kicking off next week. Also in North America, the data center upgrade happens at that same time, as does patch 6.38, which we don't have official lists of what's going to be in 6.38. But the rumors seem to be, Kronos, that this one's going to be mostly about potentially some gear acquisition changes, things like that, if you read rumors on the internet. What are you looking for out of 6.38? Is there anything you think nobody's keeping a bead on but will drop?
Nah, I'm not really expecting much. I'd like to see some job adjustments, but I don't know. There hasn't really been talk of what they're going to do with it. Or maybe even some adjustments to the Ultimate. I don't know. It's
like nerfs or...
I don't know. I just think there's still some funky stuff in the Ultimate overall. They fixed a couple things, like some auto attacks that are weird in there.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I'm getting pretty decently close to the finish line. So we'll see. I might be done by the time this patch hits. It'll be close. So might be.
Tark, what are you looking for? 6.38.
Nothing really. I'm actually looking forward to the live letter, which is I think next week. So
yeah, it's the following week. Getting ready for the 6.4 reveal. And what we can expect in there as we're closing in on it, gents. Like, there's not a lot of time now between the next live letter talking about 6.4, and then we kind of roll right into the beginning of the fan festivals and what we presume to be getting expansion news about what we'll be looking at next year in 2024 when we all think that'll come, like late Q1, Q2-ish, early Q2-ish. Or we still agree that that's probably the timeline, like a March, April, May type thing, maybe a dip into June and just call it, summer 2024.
I'm probably more on the later side, yeah. Like I'd probably say May-ish.
With the timeline that I laid out previously, May for this upcoming patch, September, October, and then it's 6 months. Like you go longer than 6 months, that's just kind of
it just starts feeling weird. Yeah. We've already talked about how it feels a little weird right now, actually, already, with seeing how that extra 2 weeks per patch kind of has been stretching things out. If you're on the PvP side of things, this week we'll also see the closing of Season 5 on the Crystalline Conflict. Obviously, if you're listening to this and you're just thinking, oh, damn, I didn't... Yeah, it's too late, obviously. You're not going to make a lot of leeway in swinging over the next couple of days, but you might be able to grind out a couple of those rewards. I got to ask, because we were all generally pretty positive about the mode itself when it came out. We did speculate saying that, the way it's structured, though, it does have this... Maybe it's not going to be great a month from now, with the whole ranking system and the kind of oddball things they were doing with that. Are you still grinding away season after season, Kronos, to get your different rewards? Or has even somebody like you that has incentive to do it, have you just kind of fallen out of it too?
I do the series. I don't really play ranked.
You don't do the ranked season stuff?
I don't think I've played a ranked game since season 2 or 3. I might have played a couple in 3, but season 1 I was Crystal, and then season 2 I think I did some last minute stuff just for fun and got back to Diamond, I think. And then season 3 I don't think I played at all. Yeah, so I still play the casual mode just for tomes and.
How are your queues?
The casual mode, if I play after work, it's pretty instant. The rank, that's kind of the mode of the reason I stopped playing rank too, is rank queues became longer and casual queues are instant. So It's I'll do the casual stuff for tomes and then the series rewards, because it's sometimes just a mount or a suit, some armor that looks kind of nice. So I have been doing the series, at least up to the part where you get the last reward that's not just trophy crystals.
Right.
Those I've done. But yeah, I don't know. I think I don't know. It just feels like they're forgetting about it again. Honestly.
Which doesn't surprise any of us if you go back and listen to our stuff. Tark, when's the last time you jumped in?
Unless you're getting into ranked those first 2 to 3 weeks, the queue times just become exponentially larger. The farther you go, people just drop off I got Crystal, and they tune out. So when I want to play PvP,
we talked about that. Without a decay system, there is no incentive to keep playing.
Exactly. So I do some frontline. I'll do the casual because that has good queue times, and that's how I get my series rewards. I actually haven't touched rank at all because I was prepping for ultimate, and it just kind of was out of sight, out of mind. So I'm going through and getting my series rewards, but the season.
I'm sure I'm going to shock all of you here in a moment.
You haven't touched it at all, right?
Yeah, I have not been in casual or ranked Crystalline Conflict in any way, shape, or form since Season 1 and its initial launch, and I felt like I had to play it a few times just so I could speak intelligently about it on the show. So that was literally the last time I've even set foot in that section of the duty finder, let alone actually gone and done anything.
That kind of sucks because the new map I find to be a lot of fun. It's very chaotic.
I
love the new map. I love the new map. So much stuff going on.
There's too much shit, but it's designed that way. I think it's supposed to be that way. I think the jobs and stuff in there still feel pretty cool, and I think from a balance perspective, they've balanced the jobs a lot better than it was initially. But there's really no incentive to go in there outside the series. If you just most people, I think, are just doing what we're doing, what Tark and I are doing.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just like getting the series armor or whatever that rank 25 reward is. And then that's it.
Yep.
I think your ranked people are the same people that were doing like ranked feast at this point.
Yeah.
Maybe a little bit more because I think the mode's a bit more accessible and fun. But I think they're losing people. And I think also there's still a lot of rampant cheating as far as I understand. So
Yeah, I've seen a lot of stories about win trading and other shenanigans. So,
Well, there you go. I'm sure we'll have a lot more when we get the live letter. We can talk about 6.4. So let's move on to some other Square Enix news. Taking a look at Final Fantasy XVI. According to an interview with Famitsu and translated by Atai Kimochi on Twitter, Hiroshi Takai and producer Naoki Yoshida confirm that Final Fantasy XVI will take 70 to 80 hours to complete if you want to see and do everything. They say that the main storyline will probably take about 35 hours to clear, and then double that amount if you include all the side content and things like that. Yoshida said they wanted the players to be able to experience the story from start to finish, and if the story length itself was too long, then it might become tiring to play. So this resulted in the shorter 35-hour main quest and then a ton of side stuff. If you want to master all and level up all abilities, gather all accessories, do all the side quests, and fight all the monster hunts, you're probably looking at about 70 to 80 hours of gameplay. All right, so first off, I am not one of those people that ascribes to the thought of the length of a game versus its cost. That's just not what I do. Otherwise, I'd feel pretty ripped off by some movies charging me $16 for a ticket if I did things that way. Like, all movies would be equal, right? $16, they were 2 hours long. Okay, cool. So I'm not one of those. And I kind of actually don't like when developers do this because invariably it's going to lead to the headlines of, people beating it in 20 hours and saying, Square Enix didn't deliver on their promised 35 hours for the main story. Like, you're gonna see all of that type of stuff. It's like I hate the headlines where so-and-so game lost X% of its player base in a month. Great. Fantastic. Who cares? Report on it when it closes. Like, yeah, just fine. So I really don't ascribe to or put too much faith in these types of things, but Yoshi P did put it out there, Tark, so what do you think? 35 hours for main story quest, 70 to 80 hours for doing it all, in comparison to previous Final Fantasies, in comparison to gaming today? Does that feel about right to you? Is it short? Is it too long? What do you think?
Feels just like a 7 remake felt, as far as, first time through, then the hard mode, and doing all the extra stuff. I dumped like almost 100 hours into that game, and I felt like I got my money's worth. So, even just with the normal mode and the main story. So, yeah, I'm all for it. Thank you for the content.
What you think, Kronos?
Yeah, it sounds typical. I think even 15, maybe like the main story was a bit shorter than this, but to do everything in 15 took quite a long time. So, I mean, this is about on par for I think like a Final Fantasy. You're not gonna get like Persona length where like your first playthrough is going to take like 85 hours. So, I mean, yeah, this is about... And again, I agree with you. I don't think hours necessarily... I think it matters to an extent. There's some context to be had, but especially like when you talk about RPG, yeah. But I don't think there's like... I mean, I'm about to buy Resident Evil 4 tomorrow, and that game's probably less than 10 hours. And I'm going to gladly pay for that game. So I don't really think...
Yeah, it's looking so good, isn't it? It's just looking so stupid. Yeah. So stupid good. All right. Now, I don't know where this is actually going to...
Get him!
Forgot the map.
You know what to do, boy.
We did get some footage via the...
Don't let them get away!
Our little dog companion. Doing some sweet stuff. Doing a little bit of combat. Yeah, doing a little bit of combat. This is...
you know what?
Clive and Joshua.
Don't let them get away.
So we're seeing a little bit of like combat abilities. They even talk about the ability to kind of combo
You know what to do.
apply different abilities.
Don't let them get away.
The way it, because obviously Google Translate, but the way it sounded was more along the lines of
Get him.
oh no, there we go. Boop, there we go. Mute that bad boy. So more along the lines of like I don't want to say limit breaks, but like magic bursts in Final Fantasy XI, where if a certain attack is used after another attack. Yeah, sorry, I didn't know the dog's audio was on. It looks pretty neat. And they also show another clip, Tark, of him being kind of like your guide, right? Like using Torgal to guide the player on what the next objective to go to is. So little more action. Just a couple more months, man. Couple more months. I can't wait to get my hands on it, despite all the feelings I might have about it being Final Fantasy.
I'm excited for this game. And I hope my $2,000 investment on the collector's edition is well worth it. So we'll see that and have an unboxing for that. But this game can't come soon enough.
Yeah, I mean, again, like I'm looking forward to it as a game. I don't know how much I'm looking forward to it as a Final Fantasy. That's a different discussion and one we've had here. What do you think of your wolf buddy here, Kronos?
Looks interesting.
I see you watching the footage over and over.
I had heard, and I don't know if this is true, that like he's tied to like a difficulty setting too. Is that true? Like that?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay, so he's just like always there in certain parts of the game.
Well, I don't know about settings, but remember the game doesn't actually like have a difficulty setting, right? It's just the optional accessories that you may or may not use.
Okay, I guess is he an
adjust.
accessory? I guess maybe that's the.
There's an accessory I believe to make him auto.
Okay,
so you don't input for him.
Yeah, you can use the one ring that makes him auto, and the
That's
other couple of rings that do other various things to make the game quote unquote easier.
That's probably what I heard then. I probably heard like the it makes him like automatically do stuff. That's probably what I heard. Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean it looks cool.
It does.
Again, I'm excited to play it too. I had the similar feelings, but I'm still really excited to play it. So
we shall see. 35 hours. Check your watches as soon as you start playing. Hit click on that timer.
I'll just let the game time it.
Yeah, the game will tell me my playtime, how much of my life I sunk into it.
Last up in some Final Fantasy news, Final Fantasy XI producer Akihiko Matsui going to be passing the torch. Yoji Fujito, not surprisingly, going to be the person filling the shoes. They both put posts on the Play Online site. The Play Online site. I know. You're kind of talking about one leaving and one coming in. And it's kind of, I don't know. As somebody who still dabbles in Final Fantasy XI, this is kind of a weird one. This feels like, oh no, in one respect. It's like, oh, that's probably not good. And then there's that other side of me that's like, okay, but Fujito is one that, wanted to do some different things and did get some things done in the game. So maybe putting somebody in charge that's like, hey, I kind of want to try to maybe force the issue a little bit might be nice if he does. Or then there's like that middle ground of, okay, maybe nothing happens out of this, and it just now we're truly in a maintenance mode, which we kind of were in a maintenance mode before, right? Like after Rhapsodies, we had like a maintenance mode before we got to VR. And VR was awesome to see content going into the game, but now maybe another maintenance mode. And when you read Fujito's letter, maybe you read even more about that. He's like, hey, first off, most of our development team has served exclusively on Final Fantasy XI for many years. Remaining on the 11 team full-time, however, would mean giving up certain opportunities in their careers as developers. For devs, working with new technologies and seeing the fruits of their labor take form in new products that can be a huge source of motivation and opportunity to grow. So rather than limit our developers to working exclusively on 11 and its decades-old technology, I believe it's going to be better to allow them to gain experience in other development environments and bring back their learnings to 11. That's a weird way to end that sentence. As such, I've elected to further downscale the scope of our development team to provide more leeway for our operations to continue. The scope of our version updates will become quite compact as a result. but in exchange, we will focus on stabilizing our operations environment for the medium and long term. So, I mean, that's maintenance mode, right? Like, we're cutting back staff, which we already knew was like, what, 10 people at this point? I'm not even like joking, right? So cutting it back even more makes it, what, 5, 6 people? What are they going to... They're going to go learn stuff, which is cool, and bring it back to 11. No, they're not. They're not going to bring it back to 11. You don't have any plans to do anything with 11 that would necessitate going and learning new skills and bringing those skills back. That kind of screams maintenance mode, Tark.
Yeah, like even he realizes that, yeah, this is pretty much a dead end, position. So you guys go off and get some opportunities in games that are actually, progressing in the future technologies, because this is just such an old game. But then further down, he's talking about how they're going to be upgrading the hardware on the back end. And I'm like, well, why would you necessarily do that if you're just going to be in maintenance mode? So I'm confused by this whole thing.
Well, see, but that's the thing. Like, to me, that makes sense. And if you read the way he describes it, he's like, hey, we're going to go into more detail for what future and plans. For 2023, they want to focus on ambuscade updates, prime weapon, reforging, and master trials. Okay, fine, great, whatever. Fortunately for us, the current dev and operations team will continue providing support, and we're working on replacing back-end hardware which supports Final Fantasy XI's ongoing operations. That could cause maintenance to take longer than usual for some version updates. And I'd like you to understand, I'd ask for your understanding, as this is necessary to ensure the long-term stability of operations. So for me, I kind of read that, Kronos, as we're going into maintenance mode, but the tech behind us still sucks, and we don't want that maintenance mode to be 90 days, 1 year, 2 years. We would like this to just stay in maintenance mode for as long as we can have it run. So we are going to have to make some back-end upgrades just so it continues to run 5 years, 10 years into the future here, even though we're not necessarily adding anything to it. That's kind of the way I took it.
Gotcha.
I mean, their back end is still like PS2 stuff, right?
Yep, a PS2 dev kit stuff.
Yeah. So it's like, I mean, the longevity on that can't be too much longer. I assume that's maybe what they're pointing toward. It's like maybe getting something that's like more serviceable, because like you're just gonna run out of people who can actually work on those things, right? Eventually.
Well, they already did that.
Yeah.
Like in VR content, some of that stuff they were like, we don't have anybody that can create cutscenes on this.
Yeah.
Like we can't make cutscenes anymore.
Yeah. I guess like creating,
we don't have anybody that knows how.
Just doing maintenance is going to become a thing too, right? I mean, that's kind of where they're at now, right? Like,
yep.
Just being able to maintain those things is also going to be hard to find people. And I mean, cutting back just makes sense too, right? I mean, how old is the game now?
But then they talk about it. It just celebrated 20th anniversary.
Yeah.
But then they talk about we want to hold live events and put out more merchandise, and COVID had stopped us from being able to do that. And it's like, okay, wait a minute. Like, is it dead or not? Because you don't hold live events for games that are in maintenance mode. Like that serves no purpose besides spending money.
I feel so bad for this game. Like, I don't know what it is about Square Enix, and they're just like, it doesn't meet expectations. Maybe that's part of it. But then I look at EverQuest, and it's still getting expansions, every year and a half. So it's mind-boggling because there's such a fan base behind 11. I just think they just need to connect 11 and 14 together and have one joint subscription, and then you'll get a lot of players give it a try if they're hooked up together.
Yeah, remember the payment system is changing, by the way, on the 14 side. That was delayed for those of you that have seen us talk about that in previous shows. That got a slight delay. Anyway, we'll have to see if this ends up being good news or bad news for Final Fantasy XI long term. I mean, I think the best you can hope for, and this is somebody who wants good things for 11, has a vested interest in that game staying alive, is maybe a bit of a smoother running maintenance mode. Like, that's kind of like where my bar is set as far as the best case scenario at this point. But I don't know. We'll see. All right, let's talk about Final Fantasy TCG. And we're going to do our usual review of the sets legends. So let's kick it off with Ace here. Our what is going on? Where is my card? There it is. Sorry. 1-drop fire forward at 9k power, so substantially above curve, obviously, with a class 0 cadet job. So, could play nicely in some class cadet decks. When Ace enters the field, if you don't remove 5 fire cards from your break zone from the game, put Ace in the break zone. Okay, well, that's why you're above curve. When Ace attacks, choose a forward opponent controls, deal it 10,000 damage, and it has a special that until the end of the turn, Ace gains Brave and can attack twice. So in Christmas Land, you throw him out there. He does get to attack. You give him Brave, and he can attack twice, hitting 2 different forwards with 10k each, knocking 2 bodies down, and hopefully getting in for damage. What do you think, Kronos? We'll start with you.
Yeah, these are getting hard for me to rank now because I feel like I'm so far removed from the game. But so I'm not like really confident on like what's meta and what's not, and what people are playing and what they're not playing. I mean, this seems on paper pretty good. Nothing like it doesn't like jump out to me as like crazy insane. Obviously, if he like gets to attack, that's really good. The added cost of removing 5 doesn't seem that hard to do later in the game. I mean, he costs 1, but he's not an early card.
No,
No, he definitely isn't.
Thinking.
So like, and the thing is like about the S is like because he feels later, and I feel like there's like a lot of other really good fire cards. I don't know how many copies of this guy you're really running, but I could be wrong about that too. So I'm like, I feel like he's just pretty good and strong. So like, I don't know, it's probably somewhere like around a 7 or so, 8.
Yeah,
maybe.
it's one of those ones that it's like, okay, I actually don't even care that you're a class 0 cadet. Because honestly, I think if you're running a cadet's tribal deck, you're probably using a different Ace for a different reason. But this is like, I can't imagine running a mono fire deck and not at least chucking one of these in there. Like just being a big old beat stick, and when you get it, you get it. And then if you think, hey, let's cater to that special a little more and put a second copy in there, a third copy in, there's, of course, the ability to search this in different builds that aren't necessarily straight cadet builds, but are more to the fire side, or even like a fire lightning. Anything that gives haste is going to help here, right? Like if you can goblin out, or you can 3-drop Ramu in a fire lightning deck, like anything you can do to give this haste if you want to pop that special particularly, those are very, very awesome. So yeah, I think it's very build dependent, except if you're running mono fire. Like if you're playing a mono fire aggro deck, I know a player in our locals, Tark, that there's just going to be at least one of these sitting in that deck, and you always got to kind of be, okay, I got to wait for that to pop out. Great. I love the art too. I love the art. I'm probably going to give this an 8. I think, Kronos, it's a little better than you might give it some credit for, and that just may be, the cadet talking. I think can be a little bit better. I don't think it's tied to being a cadet or in a cadet's deck. I think every mono fire pops 1 of these at least in there, just for the lulls of a 1-drop mid to late game 9k that you have to deal with right now, or I'm going to start taking out forwards. I'm going to give it an 8. I think it seems a little strong. Is it going to be terribly meta? Probably not. But just simply because the decks it sits in aren't exactly tier 0 in meta. Tark, as a newer player, how do you read this?
At first I thought, oh my god, 1 for 9,000, and you could start picking off forwards. I'm like, oh my god, that's broken. And then I saw the 5, cost of the break zone. I'm like, okay, that makes a little bit more sense. That's a little bit more balanced. You can't, unless you're dumping your whole hand turn 1, like you're not really gonna do that for this 1 card. So I think it's perfectly balanced in the way it is. It is strong. I would say I'm right with you. I give it an 8.
Yeah, and most fire decks, they don't care about removing cards from the break zone, right? Yeah. Like, there's very little recursion in those types of decks, so not really something you have to worry about.
He is a baby Phoenix target, right? But you still have to pay the cost.
Yeah, you still have to pay the cost.
Yeah, even after you Phoenix him into play. So
Then we move to ice, and this legend has caused quite a bit of debate. Actually, like it depends on.
I actually see why, but continue. Sorry.
Is this good or is this not? Like quite a bit of debate. A 2-drop ice forward at 8K. All right, stat line right there. That's good. Then you start reading the text. Sarah Mobius can't attack or block. So it's a 2K or a 2-drop 8K that literally isn't going to help you in combat as far as being able to swing for damage or stop damage getting in. But it's got 3 dull icon abilities where you can dull and choose a forward to buff it by 2K power till the end of turn, dull it to choose 2 forwards and dull them, or dull it to choose 1 opponent's auto ability. If your opponent doesn't pay 2 CP, cancel its effect. We're starting to see that kind of, while only Fire still has a Mott, and Leviathan kind of has, the baby Amat, let's say. We're starting to see more taxing in other decks, particularly of auto abilities. So Sarah kind of jumping on that train. Kronos, you kind of like had a bit of a visceral reaction there when I pulled this card up first. So what are you thinking?
Typically, at least when I used to play, if a forward, so the way you win in Final Fantasy, there's no real burn in this game, right? Like you have to attack. So when you're playing your forwards, you kind of need them to do that. So when your forwards end up tapping for abilities, there's not a ton of forwards in the game, at least when I used to play, that would dull themselves for an ability, and that ability is really good outside of maybe Zemus, I think, when I used to play back in the day was one of them. They have to do something pretty powerful. And then the fact that she also can't attack and block is she's essentially a 6th backup. That's what I see. I essentially see a 6th backup. However, there are ways to
I don't even see her that way because she's not CP.
Right. I guess
I see her almost as a monster that can't be a forward.
That's also fair too.
And has some dull abilities. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, maybe that's probably a better.
Except
analogy.
She's easier to target than monsters are.
She's easier to target than monsters, and I mean, you could do some fancy stuff to actually allow her to attack and block. I know you could probably Cucullin her. I would assume that works.
Yeah, you could drop a Cuculain, take away her abilities and stuff, but then all she is an attacker or a blocker at that point. You've lost all of her dull abilities.
Yeah, but I mean, in a pinch, an 8K for 2 it's not bad. I think most of the time, you're probably going to be using the 2nd ability. Yeah, I would imagine.
Yep.
But the other 2 are still pretty good too. Being able to threaten 2K. I mean, a card like just Tiro as a backup that holds up later in the game. I mean, granted, you're not playing Tiro specifically for that ability, but that becomes kind of scary later. It's really hard to deal with the extra 2K on an instant speed. And then just being able to force your opponent to pay 2 more to do something can be relevant. I don't know how good she is. I actually find it really hard to rate this card, which is probably why I reacted the way I reacted.
It's one that I think is going to have to, somebody's going to have to break it, right? Somebody's going to have to figure out how to break it. Not having haste inherently hurts the card itself.
Too, yeah.
And being in ice makes it a little challenging to give it haste. So there are certain ice fire builds that maybe you consider that'll drop haste on it. There's certain, Ramu doesn't work in an ice lightning build because that only targets lightning forward. So you have to find ways to get that haste if you want to get that haste out.
Yeah.
And I always find that this is coming from somebody who absolutely loves Earth Lightning, particularly Vanille. Earth Lightning Vanille forward from the last set, who has the same dull to make an auto ability cost 2 extra CP, except she doesn't have the dull icon. It just says dull and active Vanille. So for those abilities, Vanille doesn't need haste. The problem with taxing to me, it's okay, it's annoying, but if Kronos, you want to do something to my board, you're already taking into account that it's probably going to cost you 2 more, and you're working around it before you ever even have to do anything. There's no surprises to this. Vanille is, I think, better at this only because she can do it the turn she comes in, which means if you slap it down turn 1 and they play Norsh Talon just costs 6 now to go get that search off. So there are better ways. Sarah, I don't know. I mean, yeah, you're going to put it in maybe fire and use goblins as I think Jeremy said in chat, or that seems like the most likely. I think she could be strong, but I'm not entirely sold that the taxing effect is as beneficial as I feel like Hobby Japan may be viewing it. And the control aspect of it is, dull to dull 2. That's obviously good. We ran them on for a long time because dull 1 to dull 1 was good back in those days. Now here's dull 1 to dull 2. So I can definitely see it as, hey, I'm going to have to deal with that card.
Yeah.
And in that situation, in most of those situations, you're going to come out on the plus side of the CP exchange. You spent 2, and they're going to spend 2 to 5, depending on what their removal is, to remove it.
So the counter, I guess, I mean, just thinking out loud. Amon doesn't see play nowadays, right? I would assume.
Oh, absolutely not. It's too slow. But because dull 1 to dull 1 is too slow.
Yeah, and also he could attack if he needed to. Like
that's true.
Yeah, so it's weird. Yeah, go ahead, Tark. I'm sorry. I know you.
Yeah, Tark, as a newer player, I'm really interested in what you think here because you read those abilities and you're like, man, she does a lot.
She does a lot, but she can't attack or block. So like she's a backup pretending to be a forward.
I think a monster is a better analogy. I think once you said that,
okay.
Yeah, I think she's essentially a monster that gets hit by forward removal. That's pretty much what she is.
So yeah, easier to take her out, I guess. Then in that point, but she
most of the time
can do various things. I thought dull 1 to dull 2 was pretty strong. But yeah, you're right. You can't use the first turn, so unless you can give her haste, you can deal with her hopefully pretty quickly before you're just shut down. So
all right, so here's the thing. This card's pretty divisive. Like, people either think it's total trash or they think it could be something very, very special in the right circumstances. So I'm interested to see where these scores fall. 1 to 10, Tark, where are you putting it?
6? A 6?
Kronos?
I'm going to say it's weak and hope someone proves me wrong. I'm probably saying it's like a 4 or 3.
I'm going to give it a 7. I think there's a possibility that this could break some things or make or that she could be broken. I'm not sure I'm the one to do it. I have ideas, of course, but I think a 7 is appropriate because I think even if you break her, the biggest effect is dull 1 to dull 2. So it's not an 8, a 9, a 10 card, even if it could attack or block. I just don't think it is. But I don't think it's as bad as some people might think. Although I could totally be wrong in this overseas play.
I guess my biggest worry is like all these things, like with the exception of plus 2k power, ice can kind of do through other means. And the dull 2, like, I mean, if you just want, like, if you need a dull 2 to win the game, just play some Shivas or something. That's my thought process. But
2-drop Shiva wins games, as Creon always says. Creon and Cannon in Pittsburgh here always say.
Yeah, and that's instant speed. And they don't see that coming. And I mean, they can see it, like they can predict it, but like they don't know if it's in your hand.
Now 2-drop Shiva really wins games if you cast it after Realm, which is a card we'll talk about in a little bit here. All right, let's take a look at the Wind Legend from Final Fantasy XII, Vayne, that glorious hair. 4-drop 8K. When Vayne enters the field or at the beginning of your main phase 1 during each of your turns, choose a card removed from the game with a warp counter on it. You may remove 1 warp counter from it. When a warp counter is removed from any player's card, draw 1 card. That effect only triggers once per turn. So this is the first card, gang, we have that really interacts with cards while they're in the RFG space, waiting to be warped into the field and kind of manipulating those counters. All optional. You choose one and you may remove the warp counter, so you don't have to. It's not forcing you into a situation where your opponent has warped something out, and because you have Vayne from an earlier play sitting on the board still, they're going to get there. You don't have to. But if you want the card, go for it. Already all kinds of different thoughts about some warp cards we've seen. Theodore, I know, is one that a lot of people throw around to make you discard 3 when it comes in. But there's other cards that, Melvine, getting Melvine when you want Melvine instead of having to wait. Those are all interesting ideas, and certainly in color, if you're doing a Wind Ice, maybe a Wind Ice Storm or Storm variant. but is it worth running in those types of decks at the expense of its win con? So it's a bit of a sticky situation for some of those decks. But could they see play? Could Vayne see play in other areas and get a little sneaky? Tark, we'll go with you first.
Yeah, I just learned about warp maybe a couple hours ago.
That's cool. I learned about it yesterday. So
so my only real thought was a legend we'll be talking about a little bit later, Golbez, and like, oh, you could speed up Golbez, get some more Archfiends, draw some more cards, have things flowing, and not really cost anything. He's only 4 for 8,000, so yeah, I think he's pretty cool. I like him. I don't know if Wind and Lightning really works out, but that's something you guys would have to.
Wind Lightning, I ran a pretty awesome Wind Lightning deck in Opus 17. It kind of got a little too weak in Opus 18 when Wind got all the more toys. It was just like, why even have the Lightning in here at this point when just making these all green cards would be so much stronger? There's no reason for the Lightning cards to be here.
Sounds like when I was playing. Sounds the same problem.
Yeah, it's a very Wind meta right now. I am super interested in Vayne for a couple things. I've already talked about Theodore. I like Sophie as an idea, which is an Ice Earth card later. We won't be talking about it on this show because it's not a legend, but whatever. Oh yeah, we will. No, we won't. No, we won't. I confused.
Make up your mind.
Yeah, I confused Sophie and Preesh in my head. My bad. I actually really like Vayne here. I like the idea of a turn 1 warp of Theodore, and your opponent kind of takes the turn and says, okay, look, I got 2 turns. I'm going to slap a backup down, and then next turn I'm going to splash my entire hand out onto the board. And so they set 1 backup up, they pass it to you, and you say, okay, here's Vayne, and now Theodore's in. Please get rid of 3 of those cards. And by the way, I'm going to draw a card for that removal. Is it Christmas Land? Maybe. Is it using it to time a Melvine and stuff like that? Is it a little Christmas Land? Sophie, a very good choice for this. Is it Christmas Land? I don't know. I'm very interested to mess with this one. I like the play space that it's in, getting a bit creative with messing with the warp counters while the cards are outside of play. So I'm actually going to rate this pretty high. I'm going to give it an 8. Now, that doesn't mean that I think it's going to be terribly meta and see a lot of competitive play, but I like the design. It's a solid card to mess with, and I do think you can do some interesting stuff, even if it might take a little bit of Christmas Land now and then to really get it to pop off. I'm going to give it an 8, Kronos.
Yeah, so I just learned about Warp yesterday. Yeah, so I didn't know what Warp was until I read about it. So my understanding of Warp, I know what it does now. I know how it works.
It's Suspend from Magic the Gathering.
Yeah, but the only Warp cards I'm aware of are the ones that we are talking about today. So I don't know what Warp cards are good. I don't know
very few.
I don't know if there are Warp cards that are good. It sounds really slow. And like, but it's like, if stuff is like Golbez, I guess you're doing stuff while you're counting down. It's almost like an enchantment kind of thing where like it's there and it's doing things and then eventually it becomes something else and it does something else.
Right.
Kind of thing. Which is kind of cool. I like the design space. I think that's interesting. And I think Vayne, just from reading it and based on my understanding of Warp, I think he creates some cool things, but I think he needs other Warp cards to be very strong to be able to be abusable. Yeah. And if Warp is strong, the thing is he also draws when your opponent removes Warp counters too.
Right, so, and so you're getting that draw at least once per turn as long as a warp counter moves.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be moved by Vayne. So just even the natural countdown of your opponent's warp or your own warp is going to draw you the card too.
So he speeds up your warps and you get an advantage off of your opponent playing warp cards. So the more warp cards that are being played, the better this card is. But it's really hard for me to rate competitively from that standpoint because I don't know how good warp is. So I'll rate it based on like what you said, kind of in the design space. I think it's really cool. So I'll give it like a 7 or an 8 because I think if Warp becomes good, this is probably a card that just skyrockets.
I view it as one of those things. It's like a searcher, right? A searcher never gets worse, right? It always just gets better because it's going to get more targets to search and it just gets better. This is only going to get better. How much better? I don't know, because warp is a little bit weird. It's not exactly the best comparison to compare warp to a search, but you get my point. The more cards that have warp that become playable, the better Vayne gets. And so that's why I'm going to rate it. Tark, did you give a score?
I did not. But yeah, your point of the more warp there is, the better he is. With that kind of future proofing, I'll give it an 8.
Let's go to the Earth legend, Kefka.
I love Kefka.
5-drop 9K. If your opponent controls 3 or more forwards, the cost required to cast Kefka is reduced by 5. All right, free 9K. Yeah, hell yeah. Brave, so vigilance for you Magic the Gathering players, does not dull when it attacks. When Kefka is put from the field into the break zone, choose a summon of cost 4 or less already in your break zone. You can cast it without paying the cost, and if you do, you have to remove that summon from the game afterwards instead of putting it back in the break zone. So you don't get to double dip on that one like we've seen with some other cards. Obviously, a card that pretty much right away you're like, okay, well that's going to be used to stave off a little aggression, and you got early forwards and you got a bunch of them. Well, I'm going to have a free big body that's brave, so I'm going to get to attack you while I'm blocking your little things. I think he's actually kind of nutty. The fact that he can make himself free, I guess technically means he can go in any deck. He doesn't technically have to go in a build. Looks like Twitch disconnected. That's fine. We'll be right back on Twitch. So he's kind of nutty. I like him, but I don't know how much I like him, Tark.
The fact that he could be free and be in any color is interesting. It has to be the right moment because your opponent needs 3 forwards. But that's free. Then you can cast a summon. Then he can just he can't fling himself into battle that first turn. But once he does die, then you get another summon. So I think he's pretty cool. I like him a lot, and I like his art.
Oh, the art's fantastic. Yeah. What do you think, Kronos?
Yeah, I think he's pretty interesting because Earth has always been like very toolboxy, at least from when I used to play, and I assume that's still pretty much the case. So I think you can just play one of him, right? And you have tons of ways to search an Earth typically and get the thing you need when you need it. So if you're playing against an aggressive deck that is going to go wide fast, I think you just go and get this guy, right? And then you're just like, well, okay, if you play 3 forwards, I'm going to play a free 9K and cast a summon for no cost. So I think in that aspect, he's pretty good. But I think he's kind of in that tech cardy space where he doesn't seem overtly powerful to me, but well,
you're only getting the summon after he dies.
When he dies, yeah. But if you're playing an aggressive deck, you're probably block. So and there's ways you can sack him if you want to go that route too. But I think he's just okay to me. I think he operates in a space that could see play as a one of or whatever to get him out in those situations, because when he's out in those situations it seems really good.
Yeah.
But I don't think he's gonna I don't really feel like he's breaking anything, I guess. So
I think he's kind of nutty, actually. I think the ability to make him 0 makes him kind of nutty. He can go in any deck. Now, that's theoretical, of course. But just think what is the strongest or Cat 6 deck, right? It's you're either playing in Fire Ice, or maybe you've decided to go into the Ice Water for some other Mog reasons and things like that, Realm reasons. But most of the time it's Fire Ice. Well, you could toss this in there, and the only problem is you're never gonna play this early, right? If this is part of your mulliganed hand, rip. You're not gonna, even if you had the Earth CP because you had 2 of them, you're not gonna play it early. It is a 5-cost 9K that doesn't do anything on entry, so you really have to judge. How likely am I to be facing down 3 forwards at once? That's the question I got to answer for this guy, because in Earth particularly, there's a million other ways to get summons back, and there are in most colors. And there's multiple ways to cast them for free, too. So that's not necessarily the greatest effect, but I do think it's nutty that he can essentially go into any deck. you can just tuck him into a Fire, Ice, Cat 6 deck, and he's going to help your Count 6 or your Cat 6 counts for all the other things that deck wants multiple Cat 6 characters. I'm going to have to give it a 6, though. I do think it's a little bit on the weaker side of things. It's interesting, it's fun, and it can go anywhere, but that doesn't mean it's going to go everywhere, Tark.
No, I agree. I was going to give him a 7. Like you said, it can go in any deck. Yeah, it's specific if you're not playing the element that he's assigned to, which is Earth. But he's a 9K that could potentially be out there for 0 and free summons if you decide to deal with him. So sure, he seems like fun. He's a fun card, not overpowered.
And then we hit Kefka. Or I'm sorry, Golbez.
Yeah, my boy.
4-drop 8K that can be warped 4 turns from now. It'll come in if you want to pay 2 of any color and 1 lightning. So for 1 cheaper, he'll come in 4 turns from now. But when a warp counter is removed from Golbez, you may play 1 Job Arcfiend from your hand onto the field. When you do so, draw a card. That will only trigger if Golbez is removed. This effect will only trigger if Golbez is removed from the game, so while he's getting his warp counters spun down. All the Job Arcfiend forwards you control gain 3,000 power. I'm going to keep mine real freaking short. This card is 100% on brand. I love the theming of it as far as narratively, Golbez and the Archfiends. I think it's fantastic. I like the warp space it plays. I'm going to give it a 1. Not because of Golbez or the card itself, but the Arcfiends we have probably aren't worth this right now. They're just not. And it was weird seeing this dropped with no new Arcfiend support in from Nightmares. I'm assuming we will see new Arcfiends in Opus 20 then. Otherwise, this really doesn't have much of a home for a while. So I'm going to give it a 1 just because I think it's absolutely just not usable in a meaningful way right now. Not because the card itself is, abysmal or anything. I actually think the card's really, really interesting. Go ahead, Kronos.
I'll go a little bit higher because, if the Archfiends haven't been printed since I've played, like if they're still running kind of the same style. I think I saw the last time they printed new Archfiends, I believe. So if that's the case, I think the space he operates right now is not great because they're not great. Also, there's a Golbez that's literally you can play for free. But when I was reading about Warp, I guess you can play this guy warped and still play the other Golbez. This one just never comes into play, which is fine because I think you just want to keep this guy out of play anyways.
Yep.
Because I think if you can, you would add warp counters to this guy. I think you don't even really.
The thing is, you have to go all in with the Archfiends, right? Because you have to have them in your hand.
So yeah, with that said, I'm not going much higher. I'll say it's a 3 because if they do print new Archfiends and Archfiends are good, I think there are a couple Golbez routes you can go. I think you can play the one that costs less for the Archfiends and this guy at the same time. You could get some big forwards, and if they have good effects on them and you're playing them for free and drawing cards, that has potential to be really good. But as it stands right now, and as it's probably been for quite some time, they're just not great. So.
Bitch is 100% on brand, though, Tark. Like, narratively, I don't think you can ask for a better narrative card right there.
Yeah, and he's opening the way for his Archfiends to come in. And then when they're all there, he will then make his entrance and empower them. So he's totally on brand. But yeah, that was my question to you guys is like, are there Archfiends even any good? So,
well, Travis in chat says the 13 Archfiends were barely passable at that time. And they want us to go back to those? What a waste. We have to be getting new Archfiends at Opus 20. We have to.
If they get new Archfiends, this could be revisited. But I'll give it a 2 for right now because apparently those Archfiends aren't that good.
The one thing that hurt me the most is Kronos, I'm a lightning baby.
Yeah.
And this was my legend. It was like, ugh, that feels bad. That feels
after
bad.
What? Three Opus, expansions in a row, or your lightning has been just so OP. About time.
No, not really. 3-drop 7K water forward Refia Job Warrior of Light at the beginning of the attack phase during each turn. Activate all the Job Warrior of Lights you control. When 4 or more dull characters are activated by this effect, draw a card. Dull 4 active, Job Warriors of Light as an action ability, and you can choose a forward opponent controls and put it at the top or bottom of its owner's deck. You can only use that ability once per turn. Newest girl loving the art here. Refia checking out her little hood there, her little outfit, making sure she's ready to go. I like all the other outfits hanging in the back. You can kind of guess at what some of those might be. All right, so here's an ability that says if 4 or more are activated at the beginning of your attack phase, cool, draw a card. By the way, don't worry about trying to make them dull, because I'm going to give you an action ability where you can dull 4 of them and immediately meet the requirement for your first thing there. Kind of nutty on the initial read, but after you thought about it a little bit, Kronos, what do you think?
So, I guess there's no backup Warriors of Light, right? I mean, how many do we have? Maybe we do have some.
We do. Yeah, we do have
do.
some. We
And how
got
playable?
Kyle and
How playable are they? Like, do they see play in the Warrior of Light tribe deck?
There's 2. Arc from Opus 2.
One.
Sarah from Opus 7.
So I guess like the thing is like they need to be aware of light, and they need like, because I think if you only need to, if you can like start activating backups with this, is where it gets real nutty. Like, because you could play stuff and then like use the ability maybe, and then like activate them all and then do some
Yeah,
crazy
I mean,
main
you're
stuff.
probably going to see the 2-drop Fire Lunith backup in most cases. You're obviously not running the Refia water backup because you're running this Refia.
Yeah.
We haven't had an Angus backup in a while. We did just get a new Lunith backup in this set as well, but you're probably going to run the 2-drop Fire one. So you can sneak a couple Warrior of Light backups in. Where this is really going to shine is that kind of critical mass.
Yeah, so the thing is, like, if you have 4 forwards out and your opponent can't do much about you having 4 forwards out, you're probably going to win.
Yeah, you already won.
So to me, like, that's kind of win Mori. It's still strong, don't get me wrong. And if you're allowed to do it, sometimes it can win you a game that maybe you were behind and then you're able to do it. So I think it's strong in that aspect. I think as they print backups that are playable that are Warrior of Light, this becomes much stronger. Because not only are you doing stuff, you're also like regaining CP in a sense, and you can also like, because she activates all of them, right? Yeah. So like it doesn't need to be 4. You could like dull your whole board, and then like putting stuff on the bottom.
Absolutely. Because that is an action ability that theoretically, if you got to super critical mass and had 8 out, you could pop it twice. Or well, you couldn't because of the once per turn. But you're who's going to get up is just Warriors of Lights that are dull.
And then sometimes putting something on the top or bottom of the deck is better than putting it in the break zone.
Yeah,
so,
pop it on the top and do a point of damage and get it out of the game.
I guess if the backups aren't crazy playable right now, I'll be a little bit more lukewarm on her, but I think she has a lot of upside. So I'll say like a 6 or 7. I don't know how good the Warriors of Light are. I know at one point they were pretty strong.
And you have the light Refia but they like compete now. Like you're playing 2 different win cons depending on which Refia you're actually playing in your deck. And so Warriors of Light for me is just like in this weird spot where I think that maybe what we have to date doesn't really define the archetype. Like when you pick up a Samurai deck, you know what the Samurai deck is trying to do. When you pick up a Dragoon deck, you know what the Dragoon deck. When you pick up a Warrior of Light, you have to look through like 4 or 5 different key cards to say, oh, okay, that's the way we're going to go with this one and see if it works. I'm not a big fan of the Warrior of Light deck. I think it's interesting to watch it played. I don't like the play style of it. No. This reads nutty to me. How nutty remains to be seen.
Yeah, it's also interesting too that she doesn't really care how they got doled. So like if you're playing against
they could have just been dulled for CP.
Yeah, or they just like somebody they played characters that had ETBs on their turn that dulled your stuff so that you couldn't attack. But now that really doesn't work because you play her and then like all of a sudden all your stuff's active again. So you could do stuff like that. It's kind of interesting.
Use it to duck dull freezes.
Yep.
What do you think, Tark?
Yeah, she could be pretty nutty, especially with all the backups. Just flush yourself with more CP, draw a card, mess with the people. Again, it's a Warrior of Light deck, so I don't know how good that is, but I don't even think she's the best Warrior of Light legend in this set. So there we go.
I'm gonna give it a 6. I'm gonna give it a 6.
Give it a 6. Yeah.
6 for you. What about you, Kronos?
Yeah, I think 6 or 7 is probably about where I'm at too. I'll say 7.
All right, fine. Just to be different. I get
Yeah.
it. I get it. Just to be different. And then they printed this. 2-drop Fire Wind Zidane with haste at 7k. Can't be blocked by a forward of cost 3 or more. When he enters the field or attacks, your opponent reveals their hand. You may select one card from their hand. And if you do so, remove it from the game, and your opponent draws 1 card. So we kind of have the Kate Sith backup effect on Zidane, except you are not limited to not being able to select backups like you are with Kate Sith. This could literally be anything. And it is optional, too. So just like Kate Sith, you could look at their shitty hand and say, nah, dog, I'm fine. You keep those. Like,
You're low
you
on
go ahead and
backups.
keep those.
You can remove that backup.
I read this and I was like, this has to be, because the first time I read this, it was the translated version, and I was like, somebody goofed. There's no way. It was like a community translation. I was like, there's no way that's right. There's just no freaking way that's right. And then the full English translation version came out, and I was like, oh my God, it is right. Oh man, this card sucks. Like, if you are playing
awesome, right?
and somebody drops this on the other side, you are in a bad spot if you can't immediately deal with this thing. I think the only saving grace that's stopping you from seeing this in every deck you go against is the fact that it's Firewind. That's not a terribly tasty elemental combination. Now, there are cards in this set that they're trying to entice, like this card and some others, that are trying to entice that element combination a little more. And of course, there are ways to cheat this in other decks and things like that too, where maybe you don't care about this necessarily being Firewind. But honestly, that might be the only saving grace on this, because damn, spend 2 CP and then just basically, I'm going to get rid of the 2 most important cards in your hand right now if you can't do anything about this, and I'm going to tag you for a point of damage. That's nutty, Kronos. I mean, that is absolutely nutty.
Yeah, I don't know who at Hobby Japan is a big fan of Zidane, but like, they love Zidane, man. Zidane, like, I mean, there's 3 CP Zidane. There's Zidane they printed after I quit the game. I think that like steals cards off the top of your deck that I thought was really stupid.
Yep.
And there's this one. I don't like any of them. I played them. Don't get me wrong. I played Wind Zidane all the time. I just wish they couldn't take backup. Like, I feel like, and I think it had been mentioned in chat, it's just, if you play this early and like force your opponent to like slow start because of that, like, you can just win the game on the spot because you've now turned their draw into complete shit.
Yeah.
And it doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel like we're really playing the game. It feels like I just played a card and then took your cards.
Oh, nothing feels better than spending $600 in flights, hotels, and rental cars to go a 10-hour trip to a Materia Cup and sit down turn 1 and lose to this. I mean, nothing feels better, right?
I mean, I played Nationals and Turbo Ice was the best deck, so tell me about it. Yeah, and I chose not to play Turbo Ice, which was probably a mistake. But yeah, it's. I mean, look, I like that this card can operate in a place. Like, I like that when it operates in a space in the game. I just feel like in this game where your cards are your resources. I mean, like get this out of the way. I think this card's like at least probably a 9 or 10.
Yeah.
From a rating perspective, I just don't like the space it operates a lot of the time. But I'm sure people feel differently than that way. And I think this card needs to operate in some space in the game. I'm all for it existing in some way. I just never liked the space that Zidane seems to operate when it comes to those cards. And I get that it's like he's a thief and like he steals things from you. I get it. It just, I wish it was, I don't know. I'm not a card designer. I don't make the cards, so.
I absolutely hate this card from a design space. I think it's overpowered. But saying that aside, I'm kind of like the same thing as you, Cronus. I can't deny that this is going to be a strong card. It's one you're going to see. You might not see it everywhere just because it doesn't exactly cater to being cheated in by certain color decks. And Fire Wind by itself isn't generally prevalent, but you got soiree decks. There's no reason that this doesn't make it in there. Like there's places you're going to see this. It's a 10 out of 10. Whether you hate the card or not, it will shake things up. It's got to be a 10 out of 10 for me. Tark, what about you?
All right, so question: when it's a mixed element, do you have to have one of each element?
Yeah, you have
At least one of each. Yeah.
So you can pay four for them if you want.
Yeah, you could discard a fire card and discard a wind card because you're allowed to overpay by one for each element that the card needs.
So there's at least that. So it is mixed. But yeah, the only way this could be even more busted is if your opponent didn't get to draw a card. So at least they get to draw a card when a card is picked away.
Let me introduce you to my friend 3CPs a day, and who doesn't let you draw a card.
Yeah.
Yeah, that works. But yeah, he's so busted. I know you guys hate it, but I'm like, that's awesome. He's so powerful.
The worst part is he also is in wind, which means it's not unreasonable for you to have Althea or Chocobos and things like that to just snap this bastard back to hand and play it again in main phase 2 for a third discard.
It's one of those weird ones.
Fourth.
Yeah, it's one of those weird ones too, where you read the text and you're like, why did they go in this direction? Like, how come he doesn't have to deal damage? Why is it just when he attacks? Like, I feel like
just on swing.
Him getting the discard on ETB is already pretty good.
Yep.
Him getting it dealing damage is also pretty good. Why does he just get it when he swings? I don't know.
Says, look at the smirk on his face. He knows what he did.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, he's a 10. He's a 10. Whether you like it or not, he's a 10. Then we have a Preesh. Ice Earth, 3-drop 9K. Warp 2, so 2 turns from now it'll come back in. Ironically, more expensive than if you just cast it from hand. So why? When Preesh is in your hand, removed from the game due to warp, choose a forward, deal it 8,000 damage. Well, that's cool. I'm going to pay 4, send you out, hit somebody with 8K, and then 2 turns later, you're going to come in. What do you do when you come in? When Preesh enters the field, choose up to 1 forward and up to 1 backup, dull them and freeze them. So pop a dull freeze on a forward and a backup combo on entry. Again, I like the warp play space. You know, first glance, you're like, why would I pay more? Oh, okay, because just getting you out there is basically a summon. It's got the limitation of main phase 1, main phase 2 during your own turn, but it's basically an 8K pop summon with no restriction. Doesn't have to be dull, which is something we see a lot of in Ice. It doesn't have to have any cost restriction. It's just choose a forward, pop it with 8K. What are you thinking, Tark? You go first this time.
I'm gonna give it an 8. I love this card. She's awesome. Like, pop her out fairly early, and if there's something on the field, you get rid of it, and it's only 2 turns before she comes back, and then you can kind of lock them down a little bit. She's awesome. I love her.
Kronos? Tark, what's your score?
8.
Kronos?
I don't know if I really like this card. I don't think she's I don't think she's terrible or bad by any means. I just don't like the warp. I think warp is interesting. It's just so telegraphed, and it's like personally for me as like a player, I like to like hold on to stuff. I mean, I'm not saying again, both her effects are perfectly fine, and I think she's perfectly like costed for what she's doing. Like she comes out, she's big, which pushes are all big. I mean, like her initial effect for 4 isn't bad, and you're also going to later get a forward, but it's just like your opponent knows what you're doing at that point. And it is like you can play it like a summon, like you said, but it's not exactly like a summon.
Yeah, it's obviously during your main 1 or 2, and that's it.
Yeah,
because you are casting a character essentially.
So I'm gonna just be like kind of like I guess a little bit more lukewarm on her. I'll say like a 6. I don't think she's bad, and I'm sure people will try to play her, and she might even really see play. I don't think she's doing anything inherently crazy, and she just feels a bit fair to me, even as like a dual card. So I that's kind of where I'm at. I just feel like, yeah, she's kind of fair.
I'm going to give her an 8, and it's almost a 9. She is probably one of my top 3 cards in this set for stuff I personally play that would fit my personal play style. Preach is chef's kiss for stuff that I like to play. I'm going to give it an 8, almost a 9. Like, it's barely not a 9. I like Preach a lot. Next up, we've got, what do we have? Let me get the right, there we go. Get to the right screen. Oh, yeah, we got Cloud. Monsieur Cloud. 6-drop, lightning, wind, 9K. Cost required to cast Cloud is reduced by 2 for each card you've cast this turn. It can't become 1 or less, so cast 2, then throw Cloud out there for 2 CP. When Cloud enters the field, choose up to 1 forward of cost 4 or less and up to 1 forward of cost 5 or more. Break them. So presumably a 2, 4, or 6 CP 9K body that's going to snap 2 on its way in. And by the way, the signed art version of this is the chase card in this set. So if you happen to pull that, use a lucky dudes or dudettes. What do you think, Kronos?
I think it's pretty cool. Anytime you have cost reduction like that, I think it becomes kind of like inherently stronger just because you have ways to get out for cheaper, even though you're playing other cards. So you're still spending CP on other cards, but those cards do other things too. I think its effect is fine. I think it's pretty good. I think there might be some cases where you play this and you might only get one thing. It depends. I mean, I'm sure there's going to be plenty of scenarios where you hit both. Maybe later in the game and stuff. I don't know how good he is in wind lightning though.
Yeah, obviously you're you want the avalanche deck that plays Cloud for free.
Oh yeah. I don't
party swings. You would love that here, but he doesn't really fit in that build.
Yeah, I don't think he's gonna get played. Yeah, I don't think he's getting played there. Maybe in some wind earth stuff. I don't know how good that is now, where you just forego playing lightning cards and you just play them because you're earth and you can play whatever the hell you want to play.
Well, yeah, and if you're running Earth, you could even make that real cheap with the class Moogle that produces Earth Lightning.
Yeah. So
you don't even have to wait for a Tyro or a Shantoto. You have a 2-drop backup that can produce the lightning for you.
Yeah, I think he's interesting. I think he's a bit harder to rate for me as well. I think I'm going to be a bit more, lower on the lower end because I'm not 100% sure, but I'll say a 7 or an 8 somewhere in there. I think if you play him for 2 and you hit 2 things.
Oh yeah,
that's extremely good. But
it's that niche scenario that it's
I think a lot of times you're probably going to play him for 2 and hit 1 thing, probably.
I really like him. It's not exactly. I don't have a spot for him in favorite decks. I have an idea of where I'll put him in my bag as far as what deck he'll be in, but it doesn't cater to my play style. But I can't deny that it's strong. This is a strong card. It's got to find a very special home, but there are homes for this card. And again, you keep looking at Soiree, right? Soiree is a 4-color deck for all intents and purposes in most cases. And Wind and Lightning are 2 of those. You've got the Merolds in there. So you could theoretically put it in there. I think it does have some other homes as well. I'm going to give him an 8 on this one. I think he's pretty damn strong. And if you get him off for 2, fantastic. But I don't think you feel all that bad if you get him off for 4. And most decks have no problem casting 2 things. This isn't like you have to storm pop off and cast 7 to get that Luso entry effect. Most decks aren't going to have too much of a problem by the time you want to play Cloud, having the resources to cast 1 or 2 things before Cloud. I'm going to give it an 8. Tark?
I'll split the difference. I'll give it a 7.
Fair enough.
Yeah, I think to maximize the benefits, it's kind of niche. But he's still even at 4, he's a 9K body. And you can get 1 to 2 forwards, broken, and yeah.
I mean, in Super Christmas Land, our next card, Yuna, 3-drop 8K in Wind and Water, goes hand in hand with that Cloud. When Yuna enters the field, choose 1 forward opponent controls. If the cost is, I'm sorry, not with that cloud. If you cost controls equal to or less than the number of category 10 characters you control, put it at the top or bottom of its owner's deck. And at damage 5, when Yuna enters the field, you may search for one category 10 character of cost 6 or less and play it to the field. I'm gonna slightly broken. Like this card, particularly with some Riku backup stuff that we've gotten in this set. We've got Buddy, who now searches other Cat 10 backups. This Yuna, I think, is a little bit broken in the cards that, in conjunction with the cards that came out in this set. What do you think, Kronos?
Yeah, so again, having no context of, of what cards are good, the more 10 backups that are played, the better this card is, right? Because if you play 3 backups and then play Yuna, I mean, you basically get to return almost anything to their deck, which is pretty good. And then once you get later in the game, you literally probably are returning anything you want to their deck if you're like full in on 10, like if that's the deck. So I think again, if 10 is really good, if 10 is a deck, I don't know if it is right now, but if it is, and these are the colors they're playing in, which I think is pretty typical from my understanding, at least how it was before, I think she's pretty strong. And if you get the damage 5 off, I mean, yeah, that's going to be really insane.
Huge. Yeah, that's huge.
So
honestly, so the reason I think this is a little nutty is one category 10 backup, one category 10 monster, and there's one in water in this set that you probably want to run, or whatever. But so let's say one cat 10 backup, one cat 10 monster. Playing Yuna gets rid of a 3 cost or below.
Mm-hmm.
And that's super relevant right now. Like 3, and you hardly did anything to get that effect. By the way, you're now again top or bottom of the deck, which is always better than break, because now you have a little bit of control on where that's going to go. Maybe you're going to put it on top of the deck and just smack them to put it into the damage zone, or put it on the bottom of the deck hoping they're not going to get another search off, and it's just going to stay there for the rest of the game. It's strong. It's very strong. I got to give it an 8, particularly with the support that 10 and got in the form of Buddy and Riku backups, which Riku allows you to play cat 10s with CP of any element, or so you could dull Riku to create any element you want to pay for a 10. So you don't even necessarily have to run her in wind water. It'd be a little risky, but you could theoretically run her in a straight wind setup and just grab Yuna and the water monster, throw them in that deck, and Riku's going to be able to dull for the water for both Yuna and the monster. So it's kind of nutty in my books. I'm going to give it an 8.
I mean, yeah, if like it's good, and also like I mean, there's easy ways. Like if the Riku is the backup and this is the forward, that I just go back to like the pain, like the old like 2 CP EX pain.
Yep.
And then it's going to be really easy to assemble that team.
Well, it's even easier now because we got Buddy, a backup, a wind backup cat 10 that searches another cat 10 backup.
Okay.
So
you can search backups.
Yeah, you just go, has to be a backup. You play Buddy, you grab Riku, you throw Riku out, you're set. You got 2 cat 10s, you're ready to go.
Yeah, I mean, I'll give her an 8 too, just in that design space. If 10's good, I think she's really good. So,
if Yuna, Riku, and Pain are on the field, do we have a dance off? Is that what happens?
Well, yes, immediately. Yeah, you don't play anymore. Best dance wins.
When I played, it might as well have been you dance and I mill you. So
yeah. Back in the day. Back in the day. Tark, what are you going to give Yuna here?
I'll give her a 7 just because I don't know how good 10 is. But from what you were saying, that sounds like an awesome combo, and she'll pretty much be worth it.
Then we get to Unai, 6 cost, Earth, Water, 9K. Before paying the cost to cast Unai, you may remove a total of 2 Earth and or Water summons in your break zone from the game to reduce the cost required to cast Unai by 2. When Unai enters the field, choose up to 1 forward opponent controls and up to 1 backup opponent controls. Return them to their owner's hand, and has a dull action ability to choose a summon in your break zone, add it to your hand. You can only do that once per turn. This is one of my favorite legends in theory. I'll let you know how it plays out, but I honestly think this can be horribly abused. I think I know how I want to do it. And damn, is it going to be gross if it works. And I think others who are smarter than me are going to figure out even more ways to abuse Unai. I love the card. I can't wait to mess with it. 10. I might be overvaluing it right now, and it might not end up that strong, but from a personal interest standpoint, a 10. Go ahead, Tark, since you started talking.
You're not going to play this like first couple turns, right?
No.
I mean, because you're not going to have the summons in your break zone to...
Well, so here's the thing, though. Like, here's the thing, though. Like, if you drop that on turn 2 when they've got a forward and a backup out, that could be pretty devastating.
Set them back to 0, yeah.
You just reset them. So you can absolutely... I can see this playing in a very beginning turn in certain circumstances. You set a wind player back that, Chocobo Sammed or Norsh Talland, that's a little rough. That could be a little rough if you have a follow-up there. And then there are other times where you're gonna do it later because you're gonna use it to remove some big threats or things causing you problems. I think there's a flexibility there. I really, really like this card.
Yeah, and then you can always use the summons to pay for it to come out, and then you can dull them to use those and put them back in your hand. So yeah,
get them back. Yeah, it's always good.
Just FYI, you can't use the summons to pay for it that you're discarding or you're removing.
No,
because they're from that rule.
Yeah, they're from.
Yeah, so they have to already be there. Yeah.
Yep. 10 out of 10. Kronos, what do you got?
Yeah, I think this card's really cool. I'm not sure exactly on the strength. I agree with you. I think it's going to take some smarter people to really I think it has potential to be very, very strong. If you can play it in the early to mid game, where it's harder for your opponent to just play a backup back down, it can be backbreaking. Like returning a backup back to their hand that maybe they didn't get value out of, maybe just like a 2 CP. And they only have 2 backups down and maybe a forward, and now they're left with 1 backup and no forwards, and you played a 9K for 4. I mean, you had to remove 2 cards from your break zone. I think the last effect is just kind of icing a little bit. I mean, if you get it, sometimes it can be really good to get the summon you need back. But I think just playing a big dude and setting them behind, I think the later you play...
Or just screwing their colors.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, that too. Yeah, if they're playing a multicolored deck and you remove a backup that they need to actually pay for things, that could really set them behind too. And I mean, that could be useful later in the game as well. Yeah, it's just the only thing that kind of holds me back from rating it super high is it just feels like the later you wait to play the card, the worse it gets to me. I feel
no doubt.
Yeah,
early card.
And when I think Earth, Water, the elements that it's in, I feel like those are decks that are slower and trying to get, and they want that advantages later, and then you end up just playing Leviathan, probably the 9 CP. I do like this card a lot, though. I'm gonna give it an 8 just because I'm not sure if it's super powerful, but I like the space that it's in, and I think it has potential to be broken off for sure.
All right, we've gone over, but we got a couple more here. Y'shtola in Fire Lightning 8K. When she enters the field, you may receive 1 point of damage. When you do so, until the end of the turn, Y'shtola gains haste and cannot be blocked. When either player receives a point of damage, choose one forward opponent controls, deal a 4K damage. What you got, Tark?
I love Y'shtola. She's my bae. I give this an 8 because, bam, you're going to take that point of damage, there's 4K, and then you're going to attack, and they take a point of damage, and there's another 4K. So you could really turn the tables with this one card.
Yeah, and then she continues to get that effect anytime she's on the field and somebody took damage. She just keep pinging people with 4K anytime somebody takes damage.
Mm-hmm.
What you thinking, Kronos?
Yeah, I'm probably right around the same place. I'll say a 7. I think she can swing a game, and then in that color, there's a lot of things that do damage to yourself or whatever, and then you're probably playing bursty heavy stuff. So you play her, you flip a burst, you kill 2 things, and then she does another point of damage, and then the rest of the people swing through for the win. So I think she's good. Sure.
Yeah, and by herself, like, not only is she good by herself, but if you look at her in the conjunction with, like, the new 13 starter decks that came out, that's gross. Like, putting Y'shtola in that deck is just absolutely disgusting, or in an optimized version of that deck, I should say, is just absolutely disgusting. There's so much control, and in Lightning, maybe you have Cindy out to deal yourself some extra damage that way. Like, there's so many self-damage things in this element, in this element combination that, man, she is just horribly online. I'm putting her to 9. I'm putting her to 9. She's pretty mighty. Just letting it all hang out. She's a brick. House.
She's a brick.
House. Then we got Realm. Realm. Our ice water. 2-drop ice water, and boy, did this card serve me well in pre-release. When she enters the field, select one of the 2 following actions. Choose one monster in your opponent's break zone. Play it onto your field. Living the dream. I'm going to get somebody's Luminous Puma. It's going to happen. During this turn, if your next summon of cost 4 or less cast from your hand is put into the break zone, remove it from the game instead, then cast it again without paying its cost. Now, we're not going to get into the rules stuff that Realm needed a lot of clarification when she was first spoiled way back when. We're not going to get into the rules discussion here. We can talk about that on one of my FFTCG streams if you need some help with this one, because this one is, particularly obviously that second ability, can be a little weird, and some people have already asked about stacking certain things in certain ways, and this is actually like multiple triggers, right? The summon has to be cast from your hand and has to hit the break zone. If it is, then remove it from the game instead, and when that happens. So there's a lot of rules clarifications that this triggered. But man, did Realm serve me well. If you watched Monday's pre-release, I went 3-0 at that particular event, and Realm put in work double casting the 4-drop Shiva for free, dull freezing 2 forwards on the double cast and drawing 2 cards. Literally cost me 2 CP to get a body, draw 2 cards, and dull freeze 2 forwards. That's stuff like that is gross. Obviously, Sildra in water is going to be the card a lot of people want to double cast. Enjoy it, because I still feel Sildra is going to be banned not too far from now. There's going to be other ways to abuse the hell out of this. To me, Realm's an easy 10 out of 10. It's in a decent combination of elements for what it wants to do. Ice summons aren't particularly good across the board, but Sildra more than makes up for that in the water elements right now. And I think this is another, like, watch what Chris Matisky or somebody like that does with this card. They're going to figure out a really nifty way to mess with Realm. I think she's terribly strong. She carried me to a bunch of wins over 3 different pre-release events, and I know that's a sealed environment, but I think she's going to be equally as challenging to deal with in certain standard environments. You're up, Kronos.
Yeah, I think she's really strong too. I think the first effect is whatever. Because, like, I mean, it has to be your opponent's monster, which makes it far more limiting. But, I mean, there's no cost restriction. So, yeah, I mean, you pull a 5-cost Luminous Puma, it'd probably win the game.
Yep.
Yeah, but the summon one, I think, is the one that's going to come into play like 99% of the time.
Oh, yeah.
And double casting certain things is going to be really crazy strong for... I mean, you're paying this plus probably 3 forage for the summon, not assuming that you have like other ways to discount summons like Yuna or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, well, if you're using the summons that are in Opus 19, both the water and the ice summon in this same set, they are reduced to 0 if you have played a matching element forward in that turn. So you can cast you can play Realm, who is an ice forward and water, and then immediately drop the 4-cost Shiva on top of it for no cost because an ice forward entered your turn.
Yeah.
It does get a little weird, by the way. Those summons, we're talking about water, so I should say if you have the Yuna backup, then they aren't 0. They do, the water summons do cost 1.
That's weird.
Yeah, because Yuna cancels out the...
Why? Why would
because her text is cannot become 0, and that always takes priority when there's 2 or more of those reduction effects.
Interesting.
If any one of them says cannot become 0, then it cannot become 0, no matter how many others. No matter how many others say it just reduces. So yeah, Yuna makes like the Leviathan cost 1, not free.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, that's interesting. But yeah, I think regardless, I think she's really strong. Obviously, like as long as Soldier's a card, that's pretty nutty. If you want to go crazy, I guess one of the first cards I thought about was like the old Lich summon. That's a board wipe.
Jeez. Yeah.
That's
is a board wipe.
But I mean, you're probably not playing that. So, but just I think she also brings back. People are going to start thinking of cards like that. That might not be the card people play, but you might start seeing some funky summons from these 2 colors just because double cast to them might be good. So
yeah, you don't feel like paying 4 for that effect once, but you'll pay 4 for that effect twice.
Yeah, so I'll say 9, potentially 10. Yeah. So
what you got, Tark?
I'm gonna give her a 10. Where Vayne is, the more warp there is, the stronger he can be. There's already so many summons in the game, like you can just play around with whatever you can think of, and just again that Shiva just sounds absolutely busted. So double cast a summon is just awesome. Yeah, 10.
Final Legend is the 4-element Warrior of Light. It's the first element or multi-element card that we got that's more than 2. Fire, wind, earth, and water, kind of narratively on point there with the original Warrior of Light. You can only pay with CP produced by backups to cast Warrior of Light. Cast being the key word there. Haste, First Strike, and Brave at 10,000 power, and when Warrior of Light enters the field due to your cast, activate all the backups you control and draw a card. So if you take the time to set up the backups, he's basically free. Oh, wait, here, have a card. And so realized value, to take a term from Jeremy, the realized value on there becomes 0. Dull and choose a forward, deal it 5,000 damage. So can potentially trade up if you can find some 10Ks or above. It might need to trade up with.
Oh, it's not even trading though, right? Because it has First Strike.
Yeah, because it has First Strike.
Yeah.
So yeah. I'm gonna tell you something. I pulled this in my first pre-release kit. I pulled the full art version of this in my very first pre-release kit in Erie on last Saturday. And so immediately I was like scoping out the viability of, because you're always going to run, typical pre-release, you're probably running 3 colors. Maybe you'll get lucky occasionally and push to 2. But you're typically running 3 colors at a pre-release. So it's not out of the realm of possibility to sneak a 4th in there. So I'm kind of looking at all of my fire, wind, earth, and water cards, and I'm like, well, shit. I basically have to be in ice, lightning, earth to even have a viable deck, which means I have the worst possible cards to go with this Warrior of Light. And this beautiful full art Warrior of Light sat in the box for the entire event. I couldn't make it work. What do you think, Kronos? We'll go to you first.
Again, this is another one I find kind of hard to rate. Obviously, he reads really, really insane. The first thing though is like makes him hard to play.
Yeah. I mean, because it does say cast.
Yeah.
You can cheat him in certain ways. Some of them a little more complex than others, but in theory, he could be cheated.
Yeah. You could. Does Sybil count as cast? I don't remember because cast was introduced kind of like they changed that keyword like after I stopped playing.
Yeah. So what does what?
If you play Star Sybil, can you play him?
Yeah.
Okay.
You could cheat it in with Star Sybil.
So that's relatively easy. But I think you still are wanting to play more Warriors of Light to make him almost like have to be killed. I think he's still probably really good by himself too. Because like even if you Sybil him, you could like play Sybil, have like a bunch of backups that you spend on other things, then Sybil him out. He activates everything, you play more stuff. And then maybe you don't need the other Warriors of Light at that point. Maybe he's just good enough on his own because he has all the keywords. So maybe that could be really good. I don't know. I'm sure people have been experimenting with him. I'm sure like trying to find ways to cheat him out. So I'll say he's an 8, but he might be even higher. Because I mean, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, he's another one that I just keep looking back at. Soiree could do it, and there's no reason not to. You've got the multicolors. You've got a cheater for 4 costs or below in that deck already. Why not? I'm going to tell you where I'm going to use him. this bitch is getting straight discarded for Gilgamesh FFB if I decide to mess with it. Just because your break zone needs to have anywhere from
4
5 to
elements.
7 elements, depending on what targets you're going for. And this son of a bee counts as 4. So let me just chuck him into the break zone. It's like an entire ice deck, and I've got these 2 Warrior of Lights in there just to discard 1 and get 4 colors online. But that's just me being goofy. I actually really find this one difficult to rate too. It's strong. Yeah, you're at you're at 5, turn 0. Ice card and Gilga. That's where my brain went with this one. I'm sure I'm not the only one. I do find this I find it interesting. I find it also very difficult to rate, even being an active player. I'm going to give it a 7 for now. I am even leaning towards a 6 for now. While I think he's super interesting and can do certain things, I also think they're more niche things and not necessarily strong meta plays. But I also wouldn't be surprised to find somebody really just rock the house with this card in a way I'm not thinking of off the top of my head. So I'm going to lean towards a 6, but we'll officially put a 7 on the board, Tark.
I'll go with 7. Yeah, if you can get around, all the 4 elements needed, it's awesome. He's strong. Heck yeah. Attack and then do 5k. Fuck yeah. Let's do it.
Let's head over to Love It or Leave It. Love it or leave it is the way we end every episode of the Relic Grind here. It's where I give you something Square Enix related, and you tell me whether you love it, want more of it, or leave it, throw it away, never to see it again. And of course, since it is our FFTCG Legend review, I'm going to ask the same thing I always do. Love it, your favorite legend. Leave it, your least favorite legend. I will go first. Unai and Preesh are kind of tied for my love it's. But there's no fence sitting here, so I'm going to give the edge to Preesh only because I know exactly what I'm going to do with her. And Unai, I'm still thinking about a few different options. So I'm going to give my love it to Preesh, and I'm going to leave it to Golbez. It's just, and buddy, Golby, strong Golby. I love you. It's not you. And it's not me, and it's not you.
It's your friends.
It's your friends. Yeah, it's absolutely your friends. Or your lack thereof. I'm going to give my leave it to Golby. Go ahead, Tark.
My love it will be to Preesh. I think she's super strong, and the more things that you could do with Warp, I just see her getting better. And I'm with you. While I love Final Fantasy IV, if Golbez's friends are not, of the reputable kind that you want to associate yourself with, and you're not really going to play him. So
Jeremy in chat says, love it, Zidane, leave it, Realm. Chat, if you want to chime in with any of yours, let us know while Kronos gives his.
Yeah, I'm going to say Unai is my love it. I think that would be what I would play if I was still playing the game. That would be the first card I'd probably tinker with. So that would probably be mine. I'm going to leave Zidane. Fuck that card. It's a really good card. I wouldn't blame anybody for playing it. I don't understand how I could leave the game, come back, and every time I look at this game, there's another Zidane that just I don't understand. Somebody in Hobby Japan really likes Zidane. I like Final Fantasy IX.
Every time you turn around, he's better, faster, and cheaper.
Yeah, I like Final Fantasy IX, but this game makes me question that. So yeah,
that's gonna do it for imagine if it wasn't card name Zidane. That's going to do it for this episode of the Relic Grind. Thank you so much for hanging out with us today. Make sure you click like, subscribe, and all that fun stuff. We'll be back next Thursday with another episode. Until then, Kronos, where can everybody find you?
Yeah, same as always, Twitter. Just kind of chilling out, playing Marvel Snap, doing the Ultimate. That's pretty much it.
Tark.
Twitch, Twitter, YouTube, all at Tarkoth Gaming, hoping for a Final Fantasy IX remake so we can have more Zidanes.
I'm Mike Byrne. You can follow me personally right there at Magic Man 1, but more importantly, follow at RC Radio, RAIDEO on Twitter, and you'll know every time we're going live with a podcast, a stream, Final Fantasy locals, and much, much more. Until next time, gang, stay safe. We'll see you on the servers. Later.